We are building autonomous robotic charging arm for vehicles. The idea is starting to deploy this in public settings. We are working with malls and large parking spaces. So this robotic arm will be placed. It's on a railing, so it can slide around the entire parking lot. When an autonomous car, all it needs to do is it needs to pull into the parking space and lock in there. We have one charger for every 36 square kilometers. This is not going to stop. It's going to keep going. While this is happening, we start deploying pilots for autonomous charging with the robots. I believe that it's going to be $1 trillion problem that we are solving because we are encapsulating the need and solving the need for all of the machine economies, like, again, robots, drones, cars.
Welcome to Fully Diluted. We're here in Denver for Messari's Protocol Services at the annual ETH Denver conference. We are joined here today by DeCharge, one of the up-and-coming protocols in the sector, focusing on EV chargers and building out infrastructure for that. Without further ado, I'll have our guests introduce themselves, starting with Mohan.
Thanks for having me, Dylan and Messari. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Mohan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of DeCharge. We're building the future of the energy internet.
Hey Dylan, this is Prakash, co-founder and all things Web3 stuff. It's Sami Knife and the community region at DeCharge.
Awesome. So to start, let's just get into what is DeCharge? What problem are you solving? What does the protocol do? And why are you working on this?
Actually, that's a great question to start off with, Dylan. So the premise of us starting DeCharge was to be able to provide accessible energy to every machine on the planet. So the future is moving towards autonomous, right? And that this requires that there be less human intervention in all of these processes. So we're starting off with being able to provide access to energy at a global scale for any machine that might require it. So it might be a car, a moped, a robot, a drone, eVTOL, and then extending that to being autonomous. So we're Airbnb-fying the access to energy by allowing ecosystem participants to host a charger, a charge point that can deliver electricity, and then building the entire ecosystem of users who will then be able to utilize and then consume that energy so that they can go about, getting things done.
Makes sense. Why did you guys decide to build DeCharge? What kind of led you? What insights led you to working on this?
Yeah, so this is very funny. So I started off in 2023, right? When I wanted to buy an EV car. And it was almost at the end of the conversation when I was finalizing the purchase, and when my wife ended up asking the sales manager, saying, how do I charge it? And then he goes, no, you have to figure out a way to install a charger at home. But then she goes, what if I travel? How do we charge it? I didn't know there was public infrastructure, and until that point, I was kind of taking it for granted that it's there. You know how when you buy a car, you take it for granted that there's fuel stations everywhere. And then he said, no, you have to find a charging station, and then you go there. And we just casually looked up where the charging stations are, and around that place itself, there was no access. And then it got me thinking that this is a serious problem. I did more research on it and then figured that it's actually a really big problem. Range anxiety is a really big problem. Then I went and I took it very seriously, and then I went and spoke to some of my friends who were working at top car companies. And I asked them, is this a real problem? They go, yeah, range anxiety is real. And then I said, why are you not doing anything about infra? So a car company usually doesn't go into the infra because it's like, when you take a car company, they don't do fuel stations, right? Fuel is something different. So they generally tend to lean on to third-party providers for something like this. So everyone was building the product, but no one was building the infrastructure. I come from a background where I am very good at identifying niche areas which require technology intervention, and that can really quickly scale, and that's problematic areas. So at that point, I figured this is a problem area that needs to be fixed. I went and spoke to other logistics companies, last mile delivery companies, and because they are moving heavily to electric, and logistics is a huge cost of last mile deliveries, right? And when I spoke to them, they told me that 18% was the cost of logistics when you do a combustion engine. But if you do electric, it comes down to about 7%. So they see 11% savings. And I spoke to those people and said, if I give you a network, will you use it? So they said, yeah, we're looking for it. If you build it, we'll use it. So I diverted the money I was going to pay to buy the car and then started building the infrastructure to help connect these people as a prototype, as a pilot. And then it worked out really well, and we saw that there's a really big market gap. And that got us thinking, and we dug really deep into this, did a lot of research. And then we found out we were looking at the best approaches to get there. That's how we ended up being a Web3 company, because we were able to mix the Web2 and Web3 components together, and then so that it helps us with scale and incentives at the same time. And then this problem reaches beyond borders, right? It's not just a subcontinent or an Asian problem or a North American problem. This is a problem across borders, because it's the same challenge of finding charging infrastructure across the world. So that was a no-brainer for us. But then when we look deeper into the entire ecosystem, we really found that a lot of these companies are moving towards autonomous vehicles. Like, Waymo is doing a lot of, they're already licensed for 3 cities. You have robotaxi coming up in the next few months. So the technology is growing at such rapid pace that it's going to be reality sooner than later. So probably talking about months, a few years. So all of this requires so much charging infrastructure. Otherwise, there's going to be a total breakdown of this entire landscape. And we found that to be a problem and an opportunity at the same time. Yeah, this extends to, again, as I said, robots. We could talk about Jensen talking about 100 million robots replacing manual labor. All of these require internet, energy. So we approached this. So we kind of reimagined the whole thing and said, okay, if we have to do autonomous charging, we need to have autonomous infrastructure. We need to have access to charge points first. How do we scale it? If you do Web2 approach, you look at a lot of challenges in terms of participation. Then we built models around it. And then we started kind of working towards extending it to where we are today. So the premise is to solve the problem of access to energy through a software-oriented approach. So software-driven problem solving.
Yeah. I'd love to quantify the size of this problem. So obviously EVs, massively growing market. How large is this market going to be in the next 5 to 10 years? And what's really the gap here in terms of charging infrastructure that needs to be filled?
Yeah, I can take that.
Yeah.
So in terms of market perspective, right, I think, so Tesla has been around for quite some time. Of course, they had to figure out their own market fit. And they are one of the few companies who have put infra money into both cars and the infrastructure also. You must be knowing the supercharger network, right? So I personally wanted to get hands on a Tesla for a long time. But of course, it was not much popular in Asia. It's still yet to come in India. That's a different thing. I think if you look at the market perspective, the growth of EVs is on the other side is much different. The commercial markets, the quick commerce kind of took a big hit in terms of growth. Post-pandemic, a lot of them relied on fast-moving like mopeds and everything. They needed sufficient charging infrastructure. So that was the bigger market there because if you look at the volumes of orders in India, like in most of Asian countries, you get like a food delivery done in like 5 to 10 minutes. That's like crazy speed, right? And this is extending into commerce, logistics, and people are no longer satisfied with the 2-day delivery that Amazon delivers. That's the scale of growth. So all of this requires mobility a lot. And this, to save on cost, they go on EVs. And there's like a massive year-on-year growth in Asia, which is not seen before. Pre-2020, this growth was not seen in Asia. And now there's an opportunity for Asia to kind of catch up with the innovations happening across the world, right? And naturally, even in US, if you look at it, it's not a price-sensitive market, but people always want better and better services. The reliability of EV charging infrastructure in North America and Europe, it's still at like 68%. There are a lot of companies who have done the recent Series B, and they are saying that's not enough. You have to hit higher, better uptime, better servicing, better customer support. So that's like a great paradigm of shift between two different parts of the world. But I think it's very accessible to us. We can see the same pattern that sees in the developed countries in Singapore as well. So that's a great market. I think for us, it's kind of following where the money is. I think that's a better, smarter way to do. So I kind of shamelessly say that we have to match Tesla's at least approach. Obviously not the scale, not yet there. But I think where they grow the most, I think that's a good indicator from a macro perspective. Micro perspective, I think for us, the opportunity is to go with the community-led approach, right? If you look at our community of ownership, it's around like 40% are community-owned infrastructure. And these are folks who understand the deepened markets really well, who have deployed Helium hotspots, HiMapper, and all that. They know they want to get in early. They want to grow the network themselves. I think that makes it more exciting for us. I would say the market opportunity is really huge. Even in here, the second best is probably like maybe some companies like ChargePoint, right? Even they give a very fragmented experience for the users here. So I think the opportunities in terms of numbers, I'm pretty sure you would have access to it. I think I keep seeing now different numbers, but I think the opportunity is much, much greater than what we realize. So just to give you an example, today a Tesla user is very loyal to their own ecosystem. There is not a good experience for a non-Tesla user to be at a non-Tesla charging infrastructure. So we kind of solve that. That is one. We are able to do that as of today. The other one is, of course, a non-Tesla ecosystem. They are also being accepted at the supercharging networks. All that is there. So the experience is also still being solved. And for us, the opportunities for Tesla user to come at our charging infrastructure, the experience should be same as for any non-Tesla EV as well. I think that's the bigger goal going forward.
Just to add a single point to what we're saying, to quantify this statement, so we are going after probably a planetary scale problem, because energy is a planetary scale need. Just like how we have breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, we recharge as humans, we recharge ourselves. Machines need to recharge themselves. And the need is recurring. They need to recharge themselves very often. Maybe, if it's a car, maybe once in 2 days. If it's a robot, maybe once a day. If it's a phone, maybe twice a day, right? So energy is something that's fundamental to functioning of the machine economy. And we're looking at being the rails on which this entire economy is built. So I believe that it's going to be $1 trillion problem that we are solving, because we're encapsulating the need and solving the need for all of the machine economies, right? Again, robots, drones, cars. When you look at cars, we don't look at them as any different to a robot. They're also, if it's an autonomous car, it's a robot on wheels. So yeah, it's a big problem, and we're happy to be attacking it head on, but in a very complementary way rather than a competitive way, because since we're building the infrastructure, the rails of it, we are also enabling a lot of other partners and a lot of other players in this space to kind of like leapfrog from where they are and provide a common base for all of them to thrive. So we're probably being that layer that connects all the fragmented ecosystem players to come together and provide that experience.
Gotcha. So massive problem, global scale. Love to get into how are you approaching at the earliest stages solving this problem? So are you focusing globally to start? Is it more regional? And also just what is your progress so far?
It's actually a great question, Dylan. I appreciate you asking this. When you're talking about solving a very large problem, there is no easy way, there is no textbook answer to how you're solving the problem. We have some of the brightest minds who went after this, and there are a lot of people in this space who are trying to solve it in different ways, right? I mean, this is sort of an unknown because it's a big problem. The right way to solve it is unknown. But from our end, what we did is we tried to kind of do a very mathematical and a very structured approach to solving this problem from both a strategy perspective and an execution perspective. An analogy to help understand this is, when, let's say that there is a food delivery order, to get to the destination, even when you're navigating somewhere you get from X to Y, there's an algorithm that runs, there's a graph algorithm that shows you the shortest path to get from X to Y, right? There are multiple ways to get from X to Y. You could take any route, but the fastest route is the most optimized route. Similarly, when all of our modeling, when we modeled this solution, we've looked at multiple options. We've looked at a pure Web 2 approach to doing this. There were some challenges there. Some of the challenges, like a couple of them are, depending on how well or how established you are, you may be limited by either capital or geography, right? So we had to invent an algorithm that is most efficient at solving this problem. So that's why our approach is deep-in. So we started implementing the deep-in aspect of it after we figured that this is the right approach to do it. We did not start deep-in because it's a fancy term. It was just the right answer for this particular problem.
So did you start out with more of a Web 2, I guess more of a conventional approach, and then you settled on deep-in as a superior solution?
We believe this deep-in is the answer to this problem. And I will tell you why. We started off with a Web 2 solution. At that point, we didn't know it was Web 2 or Web 3. We wanted to just provide access to charging infrastructure. But then at that point, you will depending on how established, I can assess it, depending on how established the team is, you would hit a brick wall of either capital or geography. Some might hit it at 10 million, some at 1 million, some at a billion, right? But there's still a limitation. For this to grow, you need access to a lot of charging infrastructure, which is scaling fast across geographies. Now, if I make it a centralized approach, I have to onboard a lot of ecosystem participants who will host the chargers for me, or go to different geographies and start leasing locations so that I can start setting up charging infrastructure. So one is cost of acquisition of users, second being the cost of acquisition of the infrastructure itself. So both become very expensive. By the time you see critical mass, you would already kind of burn out because you're already spending a lot of money upfront before you even establish. But this is the industry. When it's there, people will start using it. When you have a fuel station, people will start coming to use it. Similarly here, traditional fuel system economy, like if you look at gas stations, took maybe a few decades to get to where they are today, right? When the car economy started, they started. Electric does not have that kind of luxury. So the only way this can scale is through a network effect. You need to have strong ecosystem participation, distributed infrastructure installations by participants so that they become parts of this emerging economy. They host the charging infrastructure and then they become the go-to places. So when we were building all of this, the grand vision and the original vision was we are building the energy company of the future. We are building the rails of the future. Think of British Petroleum, ExxonMobil, Shell. Those are the energy companies today, but the energy companies of tomorrow will be different. They need to be decentralized. They need to be distributed because there will be micro mobility and micro charging. You cannot have heavy infrastructure and heavy capex cost to set up a charging station and still have micro charging transactions and to support micro mobility. It will not make financial sense. So the best way to do it is to have a distributed infrastructure, participants having charging infra maybe at the public facing location like their garages so that people can come quickly, spend an hour or two, charge and go away like an Airbnb model. That really optimizes the scale of this. And when you extend it to, let's say, drones, they'll have a landing pad, drones will come and go. So this is how the solution evolved naturally. You will see a lot of companies moving towards Web3 because ecosystem participants, early participants are also heavily incentivized to help scale the network. This was very good for us and we sort of it became a self-fulfilling prophecy sorts because when we started this approach, we started having a lot of interest and we have deployed in multiple geographies. Now we have deployments in the US, we are doing deployments in Europe, we are doing deployments in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Kuala Lumpur, in Philippines, Indonesia, India. If we were just going by Web2 approach, I don't think we would have kind of scaled that fast. But ecosystem participants are helping us. So they are saying, hey, can you ship like a few devices to us? We'll start. So we have now locations in Sweden, in Switzerland, in Latvia, in Bulgaria. So it would have been very tough.
I have a question there.
Yeah.
Does the concentration of your charging devices matter in a specific region, or does the model kind of accommodate just being able to deploy a charging station anywhere and being able to grow in parallel anywhere?
Yeah.
I think answer to this question is we spent a better part of 2024 in the operational innovation. So we have to be accommodative to different approaches and how do we figure out the pipeline. Like if you look at today's operations today, anything with Indian adjacent markets goes on autopilot. Like we don't have to look at, we basically look at charts every day and how it's happening. So I think everything starts with the blueprint of how the first 100 devices start. Then it's much easier because for people, seeing is believing, showing is doing, right? So I think we have like 60% our company on devices. The way it grows is the more and more they see how we scale in different geographies, the more and more belief they have. And I think that's how different content also kind of scales, right? So I think that's how it started. So I think the more they started seeing how we were actually deploying, we started showing a bit of content, how we were deploying in Bangalore, Hyderabad, the two major cities that we focus on. Then the belief from the community was bigger. This is the same thing that happened with the next iteration of charger as well. So we have like 10 of the chargers ready to deploy in SF right now, right? I think that's also like a great market reason. But of course, US also has a lot of different states have their own electricity norms and everything. And an electrician in a particular state cannot work in another one. So these are the nuances we have to figure out. And we make sure we don't make the mistake of scaling too fast. But once we get the blueprint, it's pretty much up only from there, from a network growth perspective. So I think that's how it kind of scales. So I think it's a challenging one for a lot of teams. Maybe I think scaling to different countries is risky and they would have probably given up. But I think not taking the risk is the bigger risk.
Yeah.
We know that we have been in India, like Asia, we worked out different countries. But I think we were very bold in taking the approach. We have a lot of venture funds tell us, like, why are you focusing on US market? It's almost like it's not contrarian to us, but it's contrarian to them. We definitely disagree with that approach. It's about finding the first blueprint that scales across different countries. So you mentioned Bulgaria. So we have one of the big scaling partners there. So it's similar across Eastern Europe. Likewise, some countries are different. Let's say Germany, Netherlands. Netherlands have like insane amount of infra. They have like one for every 2 parking lots. I don't think you find that in the US. So you have a lot of parking lots that are empty, right? Some of them, they park non-EV vehicles in EV vehicles as well. So that happens. So I think it's a matter of taking the risk in different geographies, making sure the blueprint is really clear so that community can participate much more confidently. They can either refer us to a commercial deployment or host it themselves. as long as they subscribe for the opt-in public infra model. Because the aim is not for them to just buy and mine themselves. That's not the approach. It's about how you contributing to the network and how you helping your neighbor charge at your garage. That could be like a great value add, right? I think so, because a network growth grows from commercial deployments, which are part of the public infra, also from community owned infra, which can be like an opt-in model. They can always switch it off whenever they want to, but otherwise better the openness, better the incentives also that are covered.
Also the advantage, I really like what he said about the blueprinting, which is what we're following right now. We're also seeing like a lot of rapid adoption. And this is a good point, Prakash. I'm glad you brought it up. Because if you're looking at multiple geographies and if you're doing it in a traditional approach, there's a lot of learning that you have to do as a company. There's a lot of learning because you have to have that feet on the ground, and then you have to make sure that everything is done and then everything is always maintained to the T, right? That adds a lot of overhead. But with this approach, what's happening is once we have the blueprint, we are having local participants who are local to that area to run it, which means that they are some sort of domain experts. In fact, from our initial deployments, we've had local electricians who are coming up and saying, we will do the first set of deployments, which means they are setting up the blueprint for us. They're doing the videos, recording it, sending it us. So it becomes sort of like a knowledge base for the next set of people. And then we don't have to go through such a strong learning curve as well that you have to. And then the process is established. They're setting up the process. They're also becoming community leads in that area. And from then it's just pretty much autopilot. So just by incentivizing the community to be a part of this early growth structure, I think it's unlocking the opportunity, the potential to rapidly, but within scale within regulation. It's giving us the expertise that otherwise would have been very expensive and very time consuming to acquire.
Yeah, I'd love to get more into, I guess, the concrete or the specifics of deploying the infrastructure. So what's the process for someone who wants to, deploy a DeCharge device? Do they need to own specific land? What's kind of like that general process?
It's a real estate nuance, right? It's transformative real estate. It's like just like how McDonald's becomes a franchise by knowing what's the required setups. Here, it's real estate and electricity. So today, if you have there are two ways it can work. Commercial deployments, they may or may not have access to transformer. So if they don't have a transformer, then we are talking about AC charging, right? So you are limited in the US. You're limited up to 11 kilowatt charger, which is good enough to charge it full Tesla charging in 2.5 hours. So I think that's a prerequisite. So as long as they know what land and infrastructure they have, we are talking about. So the next step is to basically get an electrician consult. You make sure you have a 240 volt plug point, and then you just have to connect it, set up an infrastructure, also get the node running, because we'll get to the latter half why we need the node. Then all they need to do is just plug into a network and start charging the car, and they get incentives for contributing to the public utility network. This is a kind of very 3-step process, but I'll also let him add to that. So in terms of how it's much easier to set up than we realized. So it's more about finding the electrical nuance for that your home supports. Most cases it can support 7 to 11. Even today's Tesla home charger comes at 6 to 7 kilowatts. So that's also good enough to add 25 miles an hour to your car, which is also very crucial when you're running out of power, so that you can get to the nearest supercharger station. And of course, in higher end, high capex models are 240 kilowatt. Superchargers are basically that. So that can get your car charged in 20 to 40 minutes tops. So I think you still have, you're talking about a waiting time. It's about what market it is. And I think for us, we started out with the 7 and 11 kilowatt hour approach because it's very easy to kind of have a community owned model. I think and the price point that we offer is very much palatable for most community kind of participate. It's very similar to a lot of deep-in devices that we see. And I think once you do, you have the option of either deploying it to the nearest commercial location if you match a certain set of criteria. The next step is, of course, if you're really enthusiastic, we have a lot of users from Seattle, Texas who are testing us. No, I have the owner. I don't care about what HOA says. I will deploy it for you. Because they have seen what the early growth has been for other deep networks. So when we see that, we had to adapt our approach, because initially we thought we were going to do managed deployment. We should not push all these pain points to the host, but people are willing to do. So you have to listen. You give what the user wants. I think so. We have adapted a very hybrid model. In some cases, we do the top-down managed deployment process much easier, less hassle. But that also gives a lot of blueprint ideas for the community. Kind of, I can do this in my country. So that's how they come to us, and we kind of give them the option for both models.
Yeah. How do you think about expanding coverage to high value areas? You have specific mechanism in place, or are you just kind of letting users deploy that right now?
So here's where the economics comes into play. You can either take a prime location in a suburban, when I say suburban, it's a non-cluster city, right? Let's say New York and SF, there's no point in going after the high expensive real estate. That's not possible unless you have a top-down approach where the malls are open to it. So it's the objective is to go for prime locations in the suburban areas. In clustered cities, you still need there are still more vehicles. There always need, but parking is expensive. But we have come across perks where okay, you know what, you install a charger as long as let's say it's a community-owned infra. Let's say Dylan has bought a device. Let's say he's bought 5 devices. Then the cost is covered. I don't need to push that cost onto the mall. You know what, you have to pay for it and park it. They won't agree to that. But if they say the device is already sponsored from our end, all you have to do is we make an agreement. You get a rev share from every installation, every charge that happens. They'll be they're more excited because also if you pay for parking, come and charge, and for each session they take a cut. So there's a good rev share model from a very small business or a big business perspective. In some cases, they may or may not want the token incentives, but the more the owner of the device gets the bulk of the incentives. So that's how we're kind of modeled out so far.
Yeah. So to add and extend this, by the time maybe this podcast comes out, we would have already announced and started our campaign. What we're doing is probably again first in the world, where we are taking a mathematical approach to this. We are getting community and people around the world to let us know, to help us map the charging infrastructure demand. So the campaign is due to go live over the weekend. So all users need to do is to participate. They just need to kind of let us know that whenever they're low on charge, they need to know that I need charging now. And we capture that. And then we build a heat map around the world to say these are the areas which require the charging infrastructure to be in place. And then we also have data points on existing infrastructure. So we overlay that on top of the map to see where there's a missing area. And then also giving tools to our community and deploy, whoever's deploying and the host to deploy, saying that, okay, this is a good decision because now I've seen that people are requesting for charging from here. They need it here, but there's no availability in this place. So it makes logical sense for me to go and deploy a charger there. That'll help them go acquire land, or even if they have space in that area, eventually making it a marketplace where hosts in that area can say that if I have space let's say I'm in Colorado, in a suburb, and I have space, and then the heat map shows that there's a lot of demand here because a lot of EV vehicles, which is unknown until now in a public setting. But now we know. So they can list it saying that, okay, I have this space available, I'm happy to rent it. And then somebody sitting in maybe New York might want to work with them to rent that space and deploy their charger so that the revenue is then distributed. They might choose to pay a rent of whatever, $50, $60, $100 a month while the host gets the revenue. So we are actually reimagining this entire deployment and the infrastructure layer itself so that it can scale fast without boundaries. So I think this is one of those good things that we're doing. The sound approach, the mathematical approach to solving that problem again is I want to just kind of hit on that multiple times.
Yeah, I want to also switch now to the demand side. So let's say you want to charge your vehicle. How do you do that with DeCharge? What's the process? What's the UX like?
We want to make it as simple as possible. In fact, funny thing is when we did our first 200 deployments in the Asian market, mostly in India, we understood the user persona. They were mostly delivery drivers. They did not have time because for them, just like an airline, airline makes money when it's flying, right? Just like that, they only make money when they are delivering. When they're idle, they don't make money. So they do not have time to download an app and do all those things. We concised the entire experience into one single web page, like everything. So we were able to connect to our OCPP protocol, run all of that complexities on our servers and backend, and let the user only see the start and stop button. All they need to do is go there, plug in, start, finish, pay, go. And even payments, we just kind of pre-auth, and then they just, without barriers. So even with this application that we're launching now, it will be a global app. We are reimagining the whole experience. If you look at any other apps, any EV charging app, I don't know, you could just go online and maybe look at their...
There's 11 of them installed.
I didn't want to take names, but over the last month, me and Prakash, we've been doing a tour of EV charging infra across the US and different regions. I have 11 different apps on my phone, and it is a nightmare. You see a map with 400 points, you don't know where to go. Sometimes it exists, sometimes it doesn't exist. Basically it's like a Schrodinger's cat thing. You don't know until it's dead or alive until you reach there, but we are trying to learn from all of those and I'm not trying to belittle other apps. I'm sure they've done their research, but I'm just trying to kind of learn from this and make the ecosystem more better so that everyone learns, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose of building better products. All the user needs to do now is to get on the app and just say, I'm going here, right? We're also putting checks in place. We're putting integrations in place where we're able to, if possible, integrate directly with their car. Like we have solutions available. Tesla has an open API. If the user authenticates us, we can keep a tab on their battery Even before they get on the trip, based on the trip, we can identify and say, hey, there's something here on the way. Do you want to stop? Can I help you with this? Charging should not be a chore. It has to be something that should not be on the user's mind. It should not be something they feel, oh, I have to take a 2-hour break for this. Make it so asynchronous that it fits into their lifestyle, right? We have other partners, like for example, Demo provides an API that allows you to connect with existing ecosystem so that we can get the data and help the users by saying that if you have low battery, monitoring it and directly saying, okay, it's on the way. Do you want to take a quick stop? And the whole layer is built on almost like a one-click experience, saying I need charging. All that the user needs to say is I need charging. That's it. Don't select the destination. Don't select the charger. I know what your car is. I know what your port is. I know how much your energy your car needs. I know how long you need to charge. Let me figure that out. I am the expert at it. My company does that. You figure out if you want to take a call, if you have a meeting, if you want to talk to your loved ones, do that. Figure that out. Let me take care of the charge. So we're building with that approach first, with a very human first approach.
That makes sense. You talked about autonomous, kind of a longer term focus on autonomous vehicles.
Yeah.
How do you think about designing around that, where you don't actually have humans in the process? You don't have to, work around their feelings and constraints.
No. Well, I'll take this and then this is my playground. So there is an announcement that we are making. I think it'll be out even before this podcast comes out, so people can refer to that. We are thinking very ahead in the market, and we are thinking very deeply about autonomous charging. We are building for that already. We have partnered with a very large robotics company out of New York. It's called Standard Bots. And then we are building a autonomous robotic charging arm for vehicles. The idea is starting to deploy this in public settings. Like earlier Prakash mentioned that we are working with malls and large parking spaces. So this robotic arm will be placed. It's on a railing, so it can slide around the entire parking lot. When an autonomous car, all it needs to do is it needs to pull into the parking space and lock in there. And we are also kind of leaning on to and working with GeoNet to help with the GNSS navigation, so that there's centimeter, millimeter level accuracy in parking. And our charging bot itself is equipped with vision algorithms, so it can identify. The same backend allows, so if I'm integrated with the car, my robot's also integrated in a way to send a command to the car only with the permission of opening and closing the charging port. So when the car pulls up to the parking spot, the robot senses it. It sends a request to the API. It opens the charging port. The Vision API navigates to the charging port. It auto plugs in. And all of this is recorded on the blockchain. The transaction starts. At the end of the transaction, we have access to the charging info. So once it reaches 80% or 100, whatever the percentage is, the charging robot pulls out. And then the transaction is a machine-to-machine transaction. So the charger has a wallet. The car will have a wallet. And then the car pays the charger and goes on its way. So there is no need for human intervention at all. Zero intervention. Maybe there's one human sitting there and monitoring if there's downtime, but otherwise it does not require human intervention at all. So this kind of creates a new economies, right? Microeconomies where you have autonomous vehicles, they're charging. You have parking lots which are underutilized. Now all of those can become just autonomous charging spots for autonomous cars, because waiting time is a big problem. Right, even for cars, even for trucks, if you look at it, if you ask a trucker, having deep conversations about it, in the trucking industry, especially EV trucks, it's a major problem. If you get into a parking spot, they have rules like they can't drive for 10 hours once they reach a certain limit. And if they park for charging and it's done in 6 hours, they can't move the truck because they can't legally drive, which means that parking lot is stuck. So then there's a huge line behind it. So no one's catering to that. So the autonomous charging future is going to kind of address all of these problems, making it seamless. Same thing with drones, right? Again, GNSS, GeoNet navigates the drones. We have landing pads. Drones land on the pads and then there's charging directly. So yeah, we're doing all of that exciting stuff. And the next week or so, I think, right, we are showcasing the video of our robot. It's in production already.
Awesome. Yeah, I think at Messari, we've kind of coined this emerging autonomous AI spaces, decentralized physical AI,
Yep.
DePAI, and you're a builder right at the center of this. How do you think about all this infrastructure coming into play? So where do you build specifically as your underlying blockchain? What are the various infrastructure components that come together to make this future reality?
Yeah, I can take that. I think this kind of the sub and question to this is like, why do you need, people ask like, why do you need crypto? And I think most projects don't have an answer for that. I think this is pretty much like the perfect boxing for us, because over the last 3 months, we have been like very intense going founder mode and different problem statements week after week, not even month, right? So every week when we go deeper into a particular problem, we somehow have great partners reach out to us, or we reach out to them instantly. So Standard Watch is a company that instantly responded like within a couple of days. So they are like, they're not even working in crypto, but they found the vision exciting and they came forward. And Geonet, Demo, these are all like great partners who have actually come forward to us. And
DeFi.
Yeah, DeFi. So DeFi is basically one of our closest partners. We have co-built this technology called open source energy module. So all it needs, you need like a interlink node which handles all the messaging layer, because if you take up a device, it emits a lot of heartbeat data. If you were to put all the data on chain, it's going to be the most expensive device ever, right? So I think it's very important to delineate what is to put on chain and off chain. When we were figuring that part out, I think the DeFi guys, we met them at one of the Solana ecosystem event. I think Solana is great that way. Yeah. You kind of serendipitously meet people, as opposed to, like in the traditional world, let's say you reach out to an MNC, they get back with the corporate process after like 8 months. With 8 months, companies can grow or die. I think that's very fast, like scaling fast and being accelerated. That's the best part. I think that's just that being in that mindset has gotten into a lot of organic partnerships. We don't do partnership X versus X for the sake of it. I think having a problem-solving mindset has helped us invite partners, also work with partners. And I think the first, I would say, the on-chain messaging demo on charging, we used like, our initial plan was to use the house power to charge a Tesla using our infrastructure. That didn't work. So this is 2 days back. And so what we do, we bought a Cybertruck and use that DeFi node and our chargers to kind of reverse charge another Tesla. So that was the first instance we actually made. And we also have the smart contract program that did that exact transaction. So this is like much bigger than we thought. 3 months back, it was just like a concept, but we didn't want to do a lot of hype before actually doing it. So now we have done it. So we are extremely confident what's able to be. And now this decentralized approach is now capable of addressing users, whether it's like a regular user or you crypto native user or you're just a host wanting to make a business out of it. All of this is answered in like one single nutshell, right? I think at the end of the day, when people want to invest in you, like they want to make money, right? So if you help people make money through a great infrastructure, abstracting all of it in the back end, and help them make the money, go about their daily lives, solving their problems, I think all of this is what's possible. So I think most of the partners that we worked in the last 3 months, which we wouldn't have been possible if we didn't go for a problem-solving approach. I think that's the secret sauce to what we work so far.
Just want to double click on some things what Prakash said, very interesting things that I think will make sense talking on this platform. So when we're talking about the infrastructure, the architecture of the infrastructure itself, when you're creating such a complex solutioning, for the end user it has to be seamless, right? As we spoke a few minutes earlier, all the user has to see is I need charging. That's just one button that they need to say, and everything else has to kind of fall in place at the back. So there's a lot of computing, lot of math, lot of thinking, lot of solution, user experience things that go behind it. So, and exactly like what Prakash said, we're very serious about how and who we partner with. We are very passionate about working with our partners. We don't just go out and announce partnerships just for the sake of it. We want to see if they're a strategic fit, if what they build is something that is important to the community, to the product. So here we have multiple moving parts, right? Here we're talking about, when you're talking about a planetary scale problem, it's not simply just putting a charger and no, it's not that way. You have a whole ecosystem of hosts and users who need to be incentivized. That's one whole piece by itself. You have an entire charging infrastructure that needs to be verified and vetted, that needs to work in a trustless or a permissionless environment. That's another whole problem to solve. There's security. There is access, there are so many moving things in there, but each of them has to have its own seamless problem. So that's where this entire infrastructure layer makes a lot of sense. Like, for example, DeFi manages all of the messaging layer. You may ask why that is, and it's not that we wanted to randomly bring this in. When there are, even today, when you have so many hundreds of chargers which are just existing, and as I said, we found out that half of them don't even exist in where they're shown. And the remaining big chunk of those don't work when they're there. They have broken handles. They don't have access. You can't access them. Using the messaging layer, all our chargers will keep writing to chain, saying that I'm alive, I'm a heartbeat, I'm here. This was my last transaction. So when a car or when we provide a route to navigate to that charger and charge, we know that it's working, it's in condition, and it's not been compromised. right? Even in a trustless environment, when there's a machine-to-machine transaction that happens, we need to know that the charges are secure. There is no compromise on it. There's no malware on it. All of that stuff happens. So it's in a self-verification mode, in self-validation mode. They publish that information onto the messaging layer saying that, hey, my last verification was 3 hours ago. Here's all my transactions. And that's a handshake with the machine saying, okay, you're safe. Okay, I'm going to do a transaction with you. You're okay. On the user incentive side, I want to talk, we're working with Linera. Linera is again, we're using them for processing all the aspects of user incentives, because when you have this kind of problem again and users being involved, there are so many activities that the user does, right? Think of analytics on a regular app. But now all of those analytics have to be rewarded because they're performing actions on the app because they want to be a part of the ecosystem and we respect them for it, right? So right from participation to accessing the app to charging here to rewards, incentives, all of those have to be captured in near real time. Just like a super fast database that you have, but we're decentralized. So we need to lean on to other partners. Like say, Linera is really good at that. They have a very good data processing layer. So we use them to process all the user incentive rewards. And then of course Solana, which runs the core of all of the charging infrastructure. So, and then of course we have other moving parts of engineering, but I think these are the main kind of areas, right? I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Also, of all these integrations, I think we're seeing a lot of activity in DePIN's energy sector, kind of building out coordination networks to connect DERs like solar panels and batteries and EV chargers. Have you guys thought at all about that? Either partnering with a specific energy DePIN network or even being one yourself?
Yeah. So we have had a lot of lengthy chat with Frederick from Sourceful. I think I remember seeing his project for the first time. It was one of the Jube LFG rounds in the round one and the earliest iteration, and I was like, "Oh, this is so brilliant!" I voted for them in one of the DAO rounds that happened. So then I messaged him, and then it finally happened to meet him at DePIN Summit in New York.
Yeah.
That happened. It is just great to meet him, and we just kept chatting. We just keep chatting every month, and it makes so much sense because, of course, there are a lot of solar DePINs, and of course we are allowed to work with. I think that's also like a big, larger problem, right? Like, because of course grid instability will be a bigger problem. It's real in some parts of the world, and we see that to be very honest, grid stability is way better in India. We are very privileged to cheaper electricity costs. So we don't get to see that side of the world. But a lot of parts of the world, it's important for people to also, like, some people are self-sovereign. They take their house off the grid. Imagine what that sounds like.
Yeah.
That's only possible with solar, right? So if that happens, it's even better for us because they are able to earn money using net metering and all that. Like that. Today, that already exists with Tesla Powerwall, right? So I think that's the same analogy here. We also have that mindset of, how do we subsidize the cost for the end user, also make use of better energy efficiency models. And I think solar DePINs are the perfect fit for that. I think Sourceful is one partner that we've had a lot of conversation with. And there are a lot of other similar DePINs that we really work with.
Yeah, perfect. I think it covers everything that we are doing in terms of partnerships and years. So one point I want to add here is the way we work is very complementary in nature. When I say that, I mean when we're working at building the rails of the infrastructure for this. So we are more enablers than competitors. So even we are even such good enablers of this entire ecosystem that we can even work with existing traditional Web2 charging companies and say, hey, we are a protocol, we have the rails. If you are a company that's existing in Las Vegas or in Nevada and you don't have presence in Singapore, I have presence there. So if you have customers over to Singapore, you can use my API to showcase my chargers in your network so that your customers benefit. End of the day, as a protocol, we have a protocol fee, which is nothing but commission in the real world, which is anyway something that they do. So building that layer of enablement is something that we're really good at. So when we were, again, architecting solution, we've been very integral. We've been thinking about an integral way of how we can bring in the DERs, the energy producers, the consumers, as well as the hosts. So it's like an open protocol, right? And we, as like Prakash said, we're working with a lot of solar DePIN providers who provide the DERs. That will help our hosts do better energy arbitrage and produce energy at a lower cost and sell at a higher cost, which is a market rate. So it works well for the entire ecosystem.
Awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, so just to kind of wrap up, would love to know, what are the major milestones ahead? You've mentioned some over our conversation, but what are the major milestones ahead for 2025? And where can listeners find more information about DeCharge?
I think near term, lot of bunch of things in the next 3 weeks until mid of March. So the next sale campaign starts. So we have done a lot of calibration. Like we have enough feedback, market feedback on where the sales can happen, which countries are the priorities for the Epoch 1. So I think the bigger milestone for us to hit 3,000 installation as soon as possible. Like we can make that happen in June, July for sure. And I think so it's a mix of community plus our own deployments. We have no limitation with scale. We have capacity to hit like 500 devices per month with constant improvements, not just like figuring out one device and think that's the standard for the entire year. Constantly think about it, like every 2 years we have great partners who can do that. And the other milestone is also make sure the deployment time is as less as possible. Within a quarter is like a long time for us, I think. But it was possible to get the devices here when we shipped it like within 10 days. So you want to make sure that's uniform for this thing. I think making that thing is a real possibility. By end of March, we'll be able to do that. So our next campaign of sales is going to be like a big milestone for the users because they get to earn points, ZK points in real time. And we'll have like weekly campaigns on who's the top leaderboard at that particular given time. And even for users who don't own an EV, but they're able to contribute to the networks during demand capture campaigns, they also get incentives. So I think even before we have like a larger mainnet, we have a lot of exciting stuff for the community to get in order on chain. I think that's the most exciting part. And I think for the longer road for XRF25, I'll let him answer to all the autonomous stuff.
Yeah. So I think he hit the nail on the head. We're all like, as a team, we're super aligned on that. I think that's exactly what we do as well. So next few months is going to be super intense operations. We have a team in place for that, just churning installations as we can. We have a production capacity right now at about 3,000 units a month. So that's something we can easily produce. We can even go higher if needed. But he was being modest by saying 500, we can easily deploy, which is true. So we want to just hit that market. We're very focused on that. While the ops team is just deploying this this keeps going. At no point will this stop until we have one charger for every 36 square kilometers. This is not going to stop. It's going to keep going. And then from a vision and strategy perspective, we are going to move into slightly larger charging infrastructure. So right now, US supports 7 and 11, but Europe and some other regions support 21 kilowatts. So we deploy 21 there. We have the products for that ready. And we then do superchargers. We are doing 140 kilowatts, 240 kilowatts, 360 kilowatts to start powering trucks, buses, and larger ones. While this is happening, we start deploying pilots for autonomous charging with the robots at large partnerships with large malls and other operators across the world. See how that goes. In all of this, make partnerships with companies like robotics companies, drone companies, which will start using us more and more and start incentivizing them and start making their lives easier. So they don't have to start worrying about this and just focus on building better vehicles and better products. And kind of scaling from there to become the energy. At some point in the future, maybe in the next mid to long term, we want to see the vision where we have large e-commerce companies can do inter-border delivery, like between Singapore, Malaysia, through drones, and then they don't have to worry about charging. So that when they find a space, the drone lands, charges itself and goes away. Providing a software layer through a software-driven hardware approach. And in the midterm, towards the long term, we are also introducing intelligence into our charging systems. I think this is a good wrap up, and we'll keep talking about it on Twitter and start getting feedback from users. All of our chargers are enabled with compute, which means that on the edge, they're able to perform agentic intelligent thinking on the compute, on the devices. So we're experimenting where each of the charger can be a self-governed device, and that charger has a personality and it's responsible for a directive. The host can give a directive saying that, okay, your directive is to make $5 a day. And then the charger is now responsible for local partnerships, for making the revenues, for loyalty programs and all that. So in our basic testing right now, and it's probably sooner than later, we saw one instance where a charger came up with a solution that it came up with a list of businesses around it, pizza places and supermarkets, and it wanted to send an email saying, if you send me referrals, I'll give you 10% commission. And the other way around, where if it refers users to there, suggesting a commission, and then we have a multi-agent network where chargers are talking to each other saying, if I refer a vehicle to you, I get 5%. It's all of them smart contract level. So I'm hoping to see more intelligence on that level. Yeah, hopefully building it to a point where it does not become Skynet, I guess.
Makes sense. And where can listeners go to learn more about DeCharge?
I think as socials are the best way. I think we are being very constantly noisy now in the coming days with a lot of great content. Shout out to our marketing team here. I think Twitter is the best first place. We don't have a Discord yet because we are trying to be having less hands-on possible. I think sometimes less is more. People kind of focus on vanity metrics earlier, which is not something we want to do. But of course, there's intention is to have the broader community. We do have our private Telegram chats for the existing device community owners, and they give constant feedback to us. So I think best lookout for users is like wait for mid-March campaign for the next device sales. It's going to be like a really exciting opportunity for people to get in and grow the network with us.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. This has been Fully Diluted, live from Denver. Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks,
Dylan.
Messari, for having us.